This is Sarah Milligan with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at the Oklahoma State University Library. I'm here in Yukon today interviewing Wendy McConnell, Dr. Wendy McConnell, for the Cowboy in Every County Oral History Project, which is a part of the O State Stories collection. Today's date is April 15th, 2016. And we are going to be talking about sort of Dr. McConnell's choice for OS to attend OSU, what sort of led up to that, and what she's been doing since. How broad is that?
That'll work.
So let's just start. Just give me a little bit of background. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Who are your parents? Do you have siblings? Any of that sort of stuff.
I grew up in Mustang, Oklahoma. Graduated from there.
Not far from here.
No. So I got to come back home, which was nice. I actually have 3 siblings. I have 2 brothers and a sister. And my sister is also an OSU alum. Went to Northern Oklahoma College, actually, kind of immediately after high school. Had a pretty nice scholarship set up there that I couldn't turn down, and so that was a nice little starting point. I think that was even before OSU and NOC kind of even had their affiliation. And then I transferred over to OSU and kind of finished out there.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about growing up in Mustang.
It looks nothing like it does now.
It's changed a lot, I think.
It's quite different. It still was a bigger school system even when the town was more rural. So still had graduated with a little over 500 even back then.
Oh, that is bigger than I would think, yeah.
But, it was nice. It was quaint. We were still close enough to the city that we could kind of go to the mall and do what we wanted to do, but kind of far enough away that you had a little bit of space.
Mm-hmm. What year did you graduate high school?
2000.
So you said that you got a scholarship to go to the NOC first. How did that come about? Was it something that you were actively seeking, or was it something that was sort of opportunistic thing, or?
A little bit of both, to be honest. Was kind of applying everywhere to see kind of what kind of scholarship money I could get. My parents had always, there's 4 of us, and we were a very middle class family, and they had always told us in the beginning, that they wouldn't be able to pay for our education. So I was trying to find kind of where I could go and kind of get, the best kind of student loan debt and things of that nature, in consideration, and where I could just kind of get a good start and get my feet wet. And that just seemed to work out the best for me.
Yeah. What did your parents do for a living?
My dad is a CPA, and my mom didn't work when we were younger, and then kind of once we got more middle school age, kind of did some clerical and accounting type stuff.
Well, I can understand having 4 children being a full-time job on its own. Yes.
Wouldn't have had it any other way, though. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, out of curiosity, what area of Mustang, because it really is a more rural community, what, did you live sort of towards more town part or more out in the country?
Kind of more towards town part. Kind of lived on the junction, kind of where Mustang and Yukon separate. We even had a Yukon mailing address, but I was part of Mustang Public Schools. And then we had Oklahoma City Utilities even, so it was kind of right on the cusp of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so let's talk a little bit about, you spent 2 years at NOC. Tell me a little bit about what your classes were like and what it was like sort of moving into that college from here.
Because it was probably the same size as my high school. And so, the transition was good, but the town was much, much smaller than what I was used to, and because it's kind of a good hour drive to really get to any kind of bigger city. But I had the time of my life up there. Had made some of the best friends that I still stay in touch with to this point. Classes were good. It was smaller class sizes, and so I really felt like we could get a lot of kind of one-on-one kind of teacher help and things moving forward. And most of my basic sciences and things of that nature, I was able to get taken care of there, and just had some really good teachers that made a big impact. Was able to do an internship while I was there. I used to want to be a physical therapist and thought that's where I was going to go with my life, and did an internship for a year kind of in Blackwell, Oklahoma with physical therapy, and decided that it wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but kind of, you know, led me to some other opportunities. And
well, I think that's actually a really good point about the class size as well as the transition, and I wonder, not at NOC, but at any point, did you ever attend any of those classes that were like 150 or 200 students?
At OSU I did.
Did you?
Uh-huh.
How did that, for you, compare? I wonder, coming from coming from Mustang, how did that compare for you, for those big and those small?
So, you know, some of my science classes were smaller, but my organic chemistries and things of that nature definitely were, you know, 100, 150 kids. And, you know, you don't get a lot of the one-on-one attention unless you really go out and seek it, you know, that you're having trouble or you're struggling. And it was a big change. Those classes, you know, were definitely harder, you know, to a degree too, and so it's hard to say if you were struggling because the material's harder or the environment was different, or you know, organic chemistry is never fun. Like class size of 10 or, you know, 100, but
you don't hear many people saying that it's the easy, and then I think that's true. Well, so you were there for 2 years at NOC. Did you? And you said that you thought for a while that you might do physical therapy. I wonder if you had in mind the area of study when you started attending there that you thought you were interested in.
I knew I wanted to do something medical, whether physical therapy, PA school, something. I like people, and I wanted to do something around helping people. And so kind of just went in for just kind of basic science type stuff so I could get courses, because most of the prerequisites for all of those degrees and graduate degrees all have kind of the same 90-hour prereq courses. And so kind of went in with that notion, at least, that wasn't sure kind of exactly which direction I would head, but that I would kind of have most of those requirements taken care of regardless of kind of where we went.
Yeah. So what made you choose to come down to OSU when you finished those 2 years?
My sister was there and loved it. Believe it or not, my dad is an OU alum and an OU season ticket holder. And so, again, it kind of came down a lot to scholarships and kind of where I felt comfortable. And I got a pretty nice transfer scholarship, a Transfer Leadership Council scholarship into OSU, which kind of helped in that, and just kind of like the feel of Stillwater. It's very kind of laid back. People are always very welcoming, and it just kind of felt right.
Mm-hmm. So had you been down to visit your sister quite a bit then?
I had.
At least you knew what you were getting yourself into.
Yes.
Was it an easy transition for you then?
I think so. I actually lived with her the first year that I moved to Stillwater. And actually ended up working quite a bit to kind of help make up for the costs and the kind of difference in tuition from NOC. Worked for the vice president of research and academic affairs, kind of there at Stillwater over in Whitehurst. Mm-hmm. So I spent 2 years hanging out in that department. And so that kind of helped too, you know, because I kind of met people there, kind of had a little bit of a network, you know, and they could kind of get me set up with things and moving forward. And
yeah, that seems like a good place to land.
Yeah. And then was on the Transfer Leadership Council, and so that kind of helped me meet other people that were kind of in similar situations that I was in, because it definitely was a lot harder to kind of make friends and, you know, get settled there.
Was that because you were coming in as a junior, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and I worked, and so I wasn't in a sorority and stuff, and I didn't have kind of, you know, a built-in network, because I spent most of my times working or going to class, and so.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, tell me a little bit about the Transfer Leadership Council. I've never actually heard of that.
Really?
So tell me about it.
It was basically kind of a group of students that had obviously transferred into OSU, and it was kind of a networking thing to help welcome in other transfer students. And so they would put on events and different things and kind of little mixers to kind of welcome them in, kind of show them around the campus. We would sometimes kind of give tours when transfer students would come, and just kind of share our experiences.
That's a great idea. I'm glad it's going on. Well, I'm curious at what point you decided you were not going to go into physical therapy.
Kind of after that internship. At least kind of in the clinic I was in, the physical therapy aides definitely had a little more patient contact. And so I wanted to do something where it was a little more kind of hands-on all the time. And so I kind of decided that one probably wasn't it. But there was a kid that had cerebral palsy that came in every week, and definitely had a lot of fun kind of working with him and building that relationship. And so I was like, well, maybe I want to do pediatrics, and that was kind of one of my next kind of big pipe dreams was, maybe something on the pediatric side of things, whether it's PA school or medical school or, again, kind of wasn't sure what I wanted to do at that point, but kind of leaning towards that spectrum of things.
So when you came into OSU, did you have in mind what you were working towards as your ultimate goal by that point?
No.
Still no? Which is totally obviously fine, but so what did you transfer with did you have to declare a major at that point?
Microbiology.
So it was
what I decided.
Which is what you ended up majoring in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I kind of figured, again, I had most of the prerequisites for any kind of medical background that I ended up going into. I kind of liked microbiology. I don't know what I would have done with the degree had medicine or something not worked out, because I didn't want to work in a lab, because that was kind of the complete opposite of what I was going for. But I just really found the stuff interesting, and the classes really interesting, and so.
So tell me a little bit about your classes then. Other than that, some were big and some were small. But
I don't remember.
Yeah, if you don't remember that.
That's all right. Biochem definitely was another one of those that's probably 200 plus. And definitely have our little study groups, and always meet over in the library. And I'm trying to remember the microbiology and immunology, and kind of those were definitely much smaller. And I don't know if that's why I kind of enjoyed those a little more. In the labs, usually there's only 20 people or so in the lab portion of those, and OSU always had really good TAs and stuff for their labs, and that kind of helped and made things interesting, kind of moving forward with things. And
Well, tell me, you talked a little bit about being a transfer student and how that affects the social part of it.
Yes.
What about as far as your major work? Was that hard to break in to feel like you were fitting in there well as a transfer student?
Other than organic chemistry, I think everything else kind of transferred in okay. Actually had a couple people from my high school that I knew that were at Stillwater, and so sometimes could kind of network in with at least some familiar faces. And surprisingly, we weren't friends in high school, but when you were Stillwater, and those were kind of the only familiar faces I knew, we definitely became a lot closer, and kind of were able to build some of those relationships.
Well, I'm curious too about as you were sort of delving into that, did you have any, I know that you worked for the VP of Research Office, but did you have any sort of lab duties or anything like that within your major that you?
Just the classes that we had to go to, kind of duty-wise or after-hours stuff, not particularly. Just kind of our designated lab times, which always made trying to work in the office hard, because those were always middle of the afternoon for kind of 2 or 3 hours, and so you'd go to work for a little bit. They were very flexible, they obviously knew that we were students and stuff, and so we could kind of go to class for a couple hours, then come back for a couple hours, then go back to class for a couple hours, and try to get as much done at work as we could while we were there.
Well, and I wonder, working at the VP of Research's office, you mentioned that it was a good place to sort of meet and network with people.
Yeah.
But, maybe talk a little bit about that. Like, is there people that you met that helped maybe direct you or help mentor you or make that maybe influenced decisions at some point? I'm just kind of curious about how that is it's a leadership place, obviously.
Yes.
They like to see students who are interested in developing that side of it. And obviously you already mentioned you're a people person, which is fantastic that you knew that was a skill you needed to go in the medical profession. But I'm just curious about maybe a little bit about how you ended up there and what were some of the things that actually happened while you were there.
I actually worked for the Vice President of Academic Affairs when I was at NOC, also. And so I think he'd kind of made some phone calls, and they kind of all knew each other at that time. And kind of made getting that position, I think, a little easier. And so kind of started that shortly after I got to Stillwater. I'm horrible with names.
It's okay. You really.
There was a retired general that worked for the university. I want to say Goodyear or something of that nature.
That's where the transcript comes in handy if you can always note that later on. Don't worry,
really.
Don't really worry.
But no, he was, and we'd have to kind of, do projects and take papers and deliver to them and stuff, and they would be there for meetings, and we'd be kind of in there handing out packets and making coffee and kind of doing those things, and could just get and kind of chat and meet the guys. They definitely worked, about 30 hours a week, and so you were definitely around them a lot. And so they were always just kind of good sounding boards, when, if you had some kind of question or concern or, what do you think about this field, or, and they, were definitely very kind of positive influences and encouraging, to kind of do what you want to do kind of things. And him specifically, I remember kind of sitting and talking a couple times, and, he was just very polite, very cordial, very respected kind of man. And so just getting to sit and even kind of talk to him and hear any of his thoughts or stories was always exciting, and he'd take stuff down to the president's office, and you'd always just feel like, I shouldn't be in here kind of things, and, but again, it was always super nice. Would come out and shake your hand and stuff, and they'd see you in their waiting room and stuff. And it was just a really kind of cool experience where you got to network with a lot of people that you otherwise probably never would have met in your life.
Not normally as an undergrad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I also think that this is interesting. Do you feel that there was an advantage to the way that you went about it, that you sort of went to NOC for 2 years and then ended up at OSU? And because I know the transfer aspect of that can be kind of tough, but I wonder if there was an advantage to that structure for you.
Kind of both. I could definitely see advantages and disadvantages to both. Like I said, I loved the time that I had at NOC. Student Senate president when I was there, was definitely very involved, and again got to meet some really kind of interesting people there that kind of helped shape and change my life. And then kind of getting those first 2 years taken care of and not being in debt when I left there was a very nice kind of feeling. So even with scholarships and loans and stuff, I was still working quite a bit when I went to Stillwater. And so I think kind of having that first 2 years taken care of and knowing they were taken care of did kind of really make a difference. My sister definitely was there all 4 years, was in a sorority, and so she kind of had this whole different life and different experience at OSU than kind of what mine was. And not that that's a bad thing, it was different, and so you always kind of think, well, had I not transferred in and done that, kind of how would things have been and how would it have been different, but I wouldn't have changed mine. I'm very happy with how things turned out. I can't have any complaints,
Well, and speaking of sort of your sister's experience in that reflective aspect, what did you do for the free time, which of course you didn't have much of because you worked 30 hours a week and were doing microbiology, but I'm just curious, like, what did you do for social time?
OSU sporting events were always so much fun. They were kind of finally starting the football renovations and stuff when I was there, but that was kind of back during the Les Miles era, and the football program was turning around, and it was exciting, and it was a lot of fun to go to the games, and and started kind of dating a guy back then, and so kind of hung out with him and a lot of his fraternity brothers and stuff, and still had some social fun when I was there. But
are there places that you all hung out pretty regularly?
Eskimo Joe's was always fun. again, I'm bad with names. I'm trying to think of all the bars that.
No,
So
okay.
like, you know, used to.
Main Street, the Strip. I mean,
Yeah,
those
pretty
are
much
some-
everything on the Strip. You know, we definitely
Yeah.
frequented.
That's nice.
We used to go to the Tumbleweed, you know.
Which is not on the Strip. Did you go to events like the Calf Fry and
I
things
did.
like that?
Went to several concerts out there. You know, 'cause they'd bring in some pretty decent country music bands and stuff back on at the Cat Fry, and Orange Peel was always a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, they
Got
still
to
have
see Goo
Orange
Goo
Peel.
Dolls when I was there, and it's one of those moments I'll never forget. Also, it was a great concert.
I forgot about that. Did they? I guess did they still had comedians with Orange Peel as comedians, and then a musical,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Oh, that's a big name for
Yeah.
Stillwater. Was it packed?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. So mainly like a lot of the campus things, and then sort of just
Yes.
normal standard social stuff. Well, and you mentioned that you were on Student Senate at Owen.
NOC.
NOC, thank you.
That's all right.
I was like, that's not right. I'm gonna mix up my letters. That you were on student council there, and that student president is what you said, right? Or student senate president. I'm curious if that interest in student council transferred when you went to OSU.
It did, and that's kind of why I got involved with the Transfer Leadership Council. You know, I definitely at NOC was kind of involved in everything and really kind of flourished, I think, in that aspect at that time in my life when I was there. And then kind of when I transferred, you know, I definitely was working a lot more, and so I couldn't be quite as involved. But the Transfer Leadership Council, and there was some kind of academic society group too that I was a member of that had events and things that we would volunteer and do some stuff around the campus for.
Is that something new for you when you went to college, or did you have those sort of leadership interests when you were in high school?
I had some in high school. More athletic involved too when I was in high school, but still did some of the leadership stuff. But I think it really flourished and kind of became a much bigger part of my life when I went to college.
I'm always curious how young adults really step into that, because
Yeah.
I mean, some people, they're just really into it, and you can tell. And some people, you know, one door opens up and they kind of slide through, and then, that's why I was asking that. I was just, because it's obvious that was something that you blossomed in. Like,
Yes.
that's a point that you found that, so, anyway, we'll come back to that in a minute, about other things, but that's why I was asking that. Okay, so you were in microbiology, you were working on campus, you did have a social life, which I'm happy to hear.
Yes.
And just sort of finishing, you went 2 years, so it sounds like you graduated in 2004.
I did.
So what happened when you graduated?
So at that point, I was still kind of late, kind of figuring out what I really wanted to do. Whether I wanted to go to PA school or go to medical school, and it wasn't really until my senior year and the guy that I was dating at the time was applying for medical school, and I had never thought that you have aspirations, but I'm like, oh, I could never be a doctor, and I could never get into medical school, and just had kind of all those kind of self-doubts and stuff at that time, and he really encouraged me to apply and to try. And so I was like, well, why not? What's the worst they could say? No, and then I was like, if that doesn't work out, then I can explore PA school or, something else going down the road, and ended up applying, and lo and behold, here we are, 15 years later or whatever it is. But I didn't get in until the 2005 class, so I had a year off between OSU and starting OSU med school.
Was there a reason you applied for the OSU med school?
I applied to several. Applied at OU, toured kind of down there, and then also applied at OSU. And at that point in my life, I never wanted to leave the state of Oklahoma, and I really wanted to just stay here and be here. And when I went to the OSU med school, I don't know if you've ever been on the campus, but just loved it. You know, at that time our class sizes I think were like 85. The little lady at the front desk, Lee, I'll still never forget her, knew every medical student's name. When they walked in the door, she'd greet them, she'd hug them, and it felt like home, you know, the minute I walked in, and I was like, I want to be here.
Did you go tour other campuses?
I did.
I'm guessing you didn't have that experience.
Not at all. Went to a couple in Missouri and was just mortified, and some others, you know, in-state and stuff, and it wasn't the same, but there's just something about the campus in Tulsa, and it's just very, very welcoming, and you felt like they wanted you to be there.
Mm-hmm. So, the application process for med school, because I want you to talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned it was one of those things that you all never thought that you could actually do that, and I think that's important for students, no matter at what point they are, to really think about. So, I understand what got you to apply, but maybe talk about the application process and some of the feelings that went with that, and the process that you went through.
You know, it's a very nerve-wracking time, and cats are never fun, you know, and you get used to kind of being, you know, the kind of big fish or the top of everything, and then you get in with a bunch of people that are equally as smart, if not, you know, a lot smarter than you, and it's kind of a big change. You know, and then just trying to get letters and things for med school, and kind of shadowing experiences, and I even believe that the general I mentioned earlier had even wrote one of my letters for me to get into medical school, so we had that relationship. You know, and interviews are always nerve-wracking, and you know, you're just not quite sure what you're getting yourself into, you know, the whole time you apply, so you're even kind of anxious just from the unknowns of what medical school is even like, and then you're excited because it's this new opportunity, and you know, it was.
So, and that's a really complex process. I mean, it's not just a normal application process, you also have to go through, and there's an in-person component, and there's all this stuff. So I'm curious about that. You graduated in 2004, and you didn't start until the fall of 2005, so you just mentioned you had a year off. At what point did you actually start your application process, and what point did you find that you were accepted?
I think I had even started it before I left OSU. And, you know, I think I had missed the class cycle deadline for the 2014 start.
Or 2004 start.
Sorry, yes.
It's okay.
I'm jumping ahead, you know, on the other 2004 start. And I ended up taking a job at Yukon Hospital here in Oklahoma City. And I worked as an orderly in their operating room. And so I literally mopped the floors and cleaned the ORs and stocked the ORs and just kind of anything I could get that had some kind of medical experience behind it, because that's always something they wanted on your applications, is either shadowing or, you know, medical type work. And just kind of stumbled into that job. And again, met some great people when I was there, and a couple physicians there that even wrote my letters for medical school, that I even still kind of talk to now that I've come back kind of full circle. And just kind of that again also opened doors, and some pretty cool relationships there even.
Mm-hmm. So you had to be pretty committed to this is what you wanted to do.
Yes. You know, I always laugh. I got my bachelor's degree, and then I went and mopped floors for a year, you know, and it's sad to say, but that's kind of still was a dream of mine, and you know, I was gonna at least foresee it till the end, and if it didn't work out, then I would kind of reevaluate my life and reevaluate things, and kind of figured where I wanted to go from there. But at that point, I kind of had it in my head that that's what I wanted to do. And
well, so talk to me about starting classes and really the coursework and the process for medical school.
Probably one of the most overwhelming experiences of your life, and I always try to describe it to people that I'm like, until you're there in the thick of it, like you just can't really begin to fathom. And you know, like I said, we had smaller class sizes, and so there's about 80 something of us, and so you really get to know everybody, and kind of that whole everybody was the top of their class before, and you put all those type A people in a room and kind of put them against each other, and it's a lot of heartache involved. And that first semester was hard, and like, am I smart enough to be here? Should I be here? And for that first cycle of tests, I even remember a friend of mine called my mom and was just like, she's upset, she's homesick, and she even drove all the way to Tulsa, snuck into my apartment, did like 7 loads of laundry, stocked my fridge, had a roast kind of cooking, and I came home from class, and then there was my mom, and it's probably one of the most epic, memorable moments of my life. But kind of after that, she kind of gave me a big go-get-'em kind of speech, and things kind of turned around, and everything kind of worked out. But that first round of test blocks was definitely eye-opening experience, and but those are some of the people that I'll be friends with for life, that I still keep in contact with moving forward. And I always describe it as like, it's not so much, and I don't want to compare it to this, but almost like people that went through some kind of life tragedy, bombing or something, but there was something that you were all part of, and only the people that were there really truly know what it was like. And it's just...
So a little bit of trauma to go with.
Yes, it really was. And, they describe it as trying to drink water from a fire hydrant, and that's kind of how it is. It's just that much information kind of flying at you.
So what changed after your first test cycle?
I think kind of maybe believing that I could do it, or believing that I should be there. And then, you kind of figure out how to study, and what study techniques work for you, and what study techniques don't work for you. And, because in college, you could kind of half study for some things and be okay, and you definitely could not do that in medical school. And so just kind of really learned where I could study. And there was a Borders cafe in Tulsa that I took over one of their little corners every weekend. The whole wait staff knew me. They'd bring me food, bring me drinks all the time. And I just sat there in the corner all day, just couldn't study with other people. I found that usually didn't work for me, and only rose my anxiety levels. And so just kind of put me alone by myself with some earplugs in, and I was good to go.
Was there a level of competitiveness then?
There was on some levels. There were definitely a couple of people in my class that definitely wanted to be the top of our class, and that was always kind of a struggle amongst them. I wanted to, do well for myself, and you kind of really sit and think about stuff in medical school, and you're like, well, if I don't know this, like, am I gonna hurt somebody later because I don't know this information? And you get kind of that guilt factor going on, and that makes you study more, and and...
Did you have anybody in your professor levels in your program that helped address that sort of thing?
We definitely had kind of stress management classes, even that the second year medical students would put on for the first years, about kind of how to adjust and how to deal with things. And even got to be a stress management leader when I was a second year to the first years. And they definitely try to play into that and the well-being of medical students. And sadly, kind of the suicide rate for medical students is on the rise. And they definitely kind of stepped in and tried to put in some programs and some things to try to help with a lot of that, because it is just kind of a overwhelming time. And again, like I said, it's a lot of type A people that are used to being kind of excelling at everything they do, and when you get to that point and you don't, it's hard.
So that's what contributed to the higher levels of suicide risk, I guess.
Yes.
Is really what it came down to. It's interesting. I was as I was driving down here, I was listening to an NPR interview. I think it was probably Fresh Air, where she was interviewing somebody who is a neurologist, and part of this said that during medical school has changed. This is why I'm thinking about this.
Yeah.
Medical school has changed in the last, I don't know if it was 10 or 20 years or whatever, but the way that they're trying to teach information is less about you have to memorize everything and be your own encyclopedia, and more you have to know where to look. Like, you have to know where the research is. You have to know how to evaluate good information from bad information. And,
Yeah.
It's not bad if you have to stop and look something up before you give your patient the answer. Which got me thinking, I wonder if that's part of it. sort of which angle did you learn? Was it both, or do you feel like you had to internalize every single thing, like you said, or I could mess somebody up?
And at that point in my life, I kind of felt like I had to internalize everything. And if you didn't know the answer, then you were failing, or failing your patient, or failing yourself, or failing something. And so, my stress levels definitely during medical school were a lot higher, and I didn't know what kind of residency I wanted to be in at that point even in my life, and you definitely wanted good grades and good board scores and good everything, so you would have kind of options moving forward, and so you're always scared if you messed up on a test, is this going to affect all these life decisions later in my life kind of moving forward, and
that's stressed me out just listening to it. Well, and you said at that point you felt that way. Is that reflect that you don't feel that way anymore?
Now I have, I can usually be very honest with patients, and if I don't know, I don't have a problem telling them that I don't know, and I feel like they even appreciate that even more, instead of trying to kind of fluff or lie away kind of or dance around an issue, and just being like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't know why you feel the way you do, and but here's kind of what we're going to try to do in the meantime, and or I would like to send you to this person because they know, or they're really an expert in this kind of specific field, and I want to get their opinion, and I feel like most people tend to appreciate that a little more, and I've kind of like I said, kind of learned to do that, and I feel like takes a lot of the pressure off, and
yeah, I guess so. Well, so at what point did you decide what you were going to specialize in? So how does that decision even come about?
So when I applied to medical school, I wanted to be a pediatric oncologist.
Oh, you were still pediatric.
I was still pediatric, like the cerebral palsy kid from the physical therapy clinic, maybe you want to do peds, and I used to love to watch those like St. Jude's infomercials, and I thought the kids were just so inspiring. And,
I don't know many people that love to watch those.
Well, they just, they're special people, and a lot of them really truly live their lives in the moment and try to appreciate everything that's around them, and there's just a different kind of quality that's even inspiring about a lot of that, and so that was kind of my initial goal in life, and kind of got into some of my pediatric rotations and just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would.
What was the difference between in your mind what you thought it was going to be like and what it was really like that made you change your mind?
A lot of it was because to do pediatric oncology you would have to do a pediatric residency first, and so kind of got into inner city kind of pediatric clinics and just child checks and pediatric neglect and things of that nature, and it wasn't quite what I thought I could see myself doing long term. Just didn't think that in the end that it would ultimately make me happy.
Were you in Tulsa doing that?
Yeah. So then I was kind of back to the drawing board, and knew that I liked some of the surgical stuff. I found a lot of that pretty fascinating and pretty interesting. There was a ENT resident when I was a third-year medical student that kind of took me under his wing, and ENT, we have kind of some pretty cool equipment, and we have a camera that can actually kind of go down and look at people's vocal cords, and when I was a medical student, he let me play with it, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I don't even know that he realizes kind of the impact he had on my life moving forward, but it wasn't a specialty that's usually on a lot of people's radars, because it's one of the smaller type specialties, and it's like I kind of like this. I need to look into this a little more, and lo and behold, here we are.
Yeah. So, what point in your education were you when you made that decision then?
Probably mid to late third-year medical student.
Oh, that was okay. I thought you were saying that a third-year medical student took you.
No, sorry. Sorry. When I was a third-year, a resident kind of took me under his wing, and so.
Wow, that was good timing.
Yes. Well, because by fourth year, you have to start kind of setting up those rotations and your interviews and.
Did you feel like you were leaving anything behind by leaving pediatrics completely?
Not entirely, because ENT has quite a bit of pediatrics involved in it. That was one of the things that I loved about it, is you still got peds, then you had kind of a lot of kind of middle-aged adults all the way up to the elderly, and you just kind of see everything across the spectrum. And so I felt it kind of filled that void, but then kind of also gave me enough of a mix of patient ages and disease processes that it would ultimately make me happy at the end of the day.
Has it?
Yes.
Glad to hear. Because that's a lot of time spent.
Yes.
So what happened once you made that decision? Sort of, what was your next step?
So for the way that it works for medical school is you have to kind of set up out rotations. And so for osteopathic ENT programs, there's not a ton of them. So there's kind of very few select places that I could apply and to do those. And so I tried to set up as many of those as I could to try to get FaceTime with the program directors, and then you kind of go on this whole interview trail. My fourth year of medical school, I actually put all of my belongings in storage and lived out of my car my fourth year, because I did all of my rotations pretty much out of state or out of the city of Tulsa. And so just had a bunch of, kind of had one tub of scrubs, one tub of shoes, one tub of that kind of things, and I just drove around the country for a year. It was.
So where'd you stay while you were at all those places?
Most of them have kind of housing set up for them for rotating students. Occasionally you'd have to try to find a resident or somebody that would let you rent a room, or one of them I ended up actually trying to rent a hotel, I think, for 2 weeks while I was there, and kind of stayed in one of those extended stay places. But
so going from not wanting to leave the state
yes,
to, by the time you're in your fourth year, to basically not living in state,
yes.
not living anywhere, how was that shift for you? Like, how did that happen? Was it comfortable?
It was kind of an adventure, to be honest, and it was all these places I'd never been. Spent a lot of time in Michigan, kind of Detroit and northern Michigan and certain parts of Missouri, and it was kind of fun. You were so busy when you were there because you were just trying to be on point and make a good impression, so you always wanted to be well read and prepared, and so you didn't really have time to sit and think that this is kind of awkward, that I haven't slept in the same bed for more than 2 or 3 weeks, and couldn't tell you how long. But I wouldn't, when I look back on it, it's a fond memory of my life, and I wouldn't have changed it.
So how did you decide where you were going to go next then?
So when it kind of came time to interviews, I interviewed at kind of several different places kind of across the country, and the way it works for medical students is you kind of make a rank list of where your top choices would be, and then the programs also do such. So this is our top candidates of who we would pick, and it goes into a computer system, and then it spits out a match. So you really don't know going in.
Wow.
One, if you're going to get picked anywhere, and then two, where you're going to end up. It could be your first choice, it could be your 10th choice, it could be none at all. And so it was a very nerve-wracking process. And like I said, kind of ENT's very, very small. There's not a lot of spots. I'd been discouraged by a lot of people to not even bother trying because it was so competitive, and that I should just do something else and not even get involved. And
who was discouraging?
Kind of other classmates, even a couple of advisors at the time. Just that it was a pipe dream, and it was something I believed I wanted to do, and if it didn't work out, then it wasn't meant to be. But I felt like it at least deserved my full attention and a chance. And
so was that discouragement from ENT in general, or from trying to do this ranked residency?
ENT in general.
Yeah, I thought you had to do one to do the other, but
yeah.
That's interesting. Well, good for you for not giving up before you started.
Well, the sad thing is every interview I went on, they literally asked, what is your backup plan if you don't match? Because it happens so often and stuff, and just got asked that repeatedly. It always just be so disheartening, and you just sit there with a smile and try to, have a good answer, but it's...
What'd you tell them?
That I didn't have a backup plan. It was ENT or bust at that time, and if I didn't match, then I would kind of sit down and reevaluate and figure out how to replay the next year. And that really was my plan at the time. I didn't have a backup plan, and so I was horrified that if that situation did come, that it would,
So tell
be
me
a little
about,
shocking.
Yeah, that's sort of that's an eye opener to have that as a part of your interview process. So tell me about what it was like when you found out you were matched.
Well, it was super, super exciting. It was just a great day, and knowing that kind of all that hard work and stuff, and kind of living out of my car and all of that had paid off, and that those dreams were finally coming true, and I would kind of look back, and for a girl who wasn't sure she even could go to medical school or, was good enough for medical school, and then to get one of those residency spots, it was, a pretty nice feeling.
Do you remember having that discussion sort of once you decided you were going to go for it, from your professors or your advisors at the medical school? Did you talk with them about the process, or once you were gone, you were just gone?
I kind of talked with some of them about the process and had tried to. There's usually only maybe one a class that even tries to apply for it, and so I was even trying to talk to some of the upperclassmen that had done it before me, and again, just not a lot of positive feedback, and especially females wanting to do it. There's not a ton at the time, and so there were certain programs that they just said don't even bother going to because you're a girl, and so there's just a lot of negativity kind of surrounding the whole process going in. And
I wonder what the sticking point is for gender with something like that. Was there a reason why that was a point that came up?
I think there had been a few programs that had taken female residents that had gotten pregnant during residency. And most ENT programs are generally pretty small. They have maybe one resident a year, maybe one every 2 years. And so when there's one pulled out of the mix, it really changes the dynamics of things. Some of the pediatric residencies and family medicine residencies, they can have 5, 10 residents a year. And so if you have one down, it's not a huge deal. It definitely makes a difference in their schedules, but it doesn't kind of cripple the whole system. And I think that was a lot of the negativity towards kind of taking a female resident for a surgical subspecialty.
And that was just pretty common knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, they can't say it,
Right.
and and it would be kind of more even people that had applied at the programs before me. It wasn't even people at the current programs, but it was just kind of a general opinion that that's what they felt.
No, I don't think they're the only ones that
No.
that's a struggle for. But that's interesting that was a big part. You also said at the time, has that changed?
Yes and no. I feel like most medical classes are now at least 50% female, for the most part. I think mine was really close to those numbers. And I feel like there's more and more kind of females coming into healthcare and even doing the subspecialties. And, I don't know that it's 100% changed, but it's still, there's still some stigmata there to it, I feel like.
Well, so where'd you get in?
Ended up at St. Louis. I was at DeBer Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. It was kind of back when the OSU hospital was going through some leadership changes, and there was some funding issues, and the kind of stability of Tulsa was not the best at the time. And so I had kind of ranked some of the out-of-state ones even a little higher at that time. And again, for a girl that came in just, I'm never leaving. When I went to do my rank list, and I actually kind of put some of the out-of-state ones first, it was a very, very shocking to me just to even think about moving away.
So is St. Louis, where did it fall on your rank list?
At the time, it actually was my first choice. So
congratulations.
Thank you.
Related, but yeah. I'm like listening to you and I'm excited for you, just even in like retrospect. So how was that? You were leaving Oklahoma as moving out of state for the first time and into this big thing. How was that? Tell me about the transition.
It was different. And kind of moved up there about a month before residency started, and I knew one person, now that I think about it, that was there, and he was a former OSU medical student, and he was doing an anesthesia residency at the same hospital. And so I had one familiar face. We weren't close friends, but at least knew somebody. But other than that, it was, kind of really had never lived out of state, living on my own, and then it's again this whole new life chapter of what's this gonna be like? How much is my life about to change? It's so exciting. You're getting ready to start, this training for what you've worked so hard and wanted to do, but then again now you're suddenly responsible for things, and as an intern it's just like, oh my goodness, this is real, and people expect me to know things, and people are depending on me to know things, and it's the stress levels just keep going through the roof, and probably I have a little more wrinkles than I should at this time, but
Did you feel prepared?
Yes and no. I mean, I don't think you can ever 100% feel prepared for any of that. The first code that you arrive at, in the hospital, and you're the one kind of running the show, like there's just no real preparation. I don't feel like, no matter how well you trained and how hard, how good you were, until that's you being the one there calling the shots. It's different, and I'll always remember kind of those first couple of experiences and stuff moving forward. And
yeah,
I mean, you've been trained to do it. It's just when you're kind of there and actually in the moment, it's different.
So how was it the first time you had a code that you were in charge?
Terrifying. When you just keep looking around, is somebody else gonna come? Is there another ER physician or somebody coming? And the nurses, were usually always pretty good, especially a lot of the ICU nurses, have definitely been there and done that, and so, ours were usually pretty good, and kind of, would knew things that kind of, why don't you think about this, or, things about, and would kind of even help cue you along, or, help you remember certain things, or do certain things, and.
So do you feel like they knew it was your first sort of step?
I mean, they all knew. They always know when there's kind of a fresh crop of interns kind of coming in, and it wasn't a super large hospital. I think it was about 140 beds or so, and there's maybe 12 of us in the intern class, so we were pretty easy to pick out if we hadn't been around before. And
so, do you remember what the emergency was?
It was kind of a complex thing. I think he'd been transferred from an outside hospital. He'd already had a breathing tube down, and been having kind of seizures and things, and ended up going into cardiac arrest and having a seizure, and but like I said, kind of thankfully he was already somewhat stabilized from the breathing tube standpoint, so we didn't have to worry about the airway part. But I can tell you exactly what room of the hospital he was in, like where he was, what time of day it was. It's just those little things that kind of stay with you forever.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what was once you sort of got through some of those firsts, you said, I can't remember exactly, it was a 3-year rotation, is that right?
5-year.
5-year rotation. So how did that, once you got through some of those firsts, how did that time sort of progress for you?
You get through kind of certain first of things, but then there was always something kind of bigger on the horizon, or bigger kind of looming, and especially in ENT, you can kind of start with ear tubes and tonsils, and kind of you start getting good at those, or getting comfortable with them, like, oh, this is nothing, and then you'd go into sinus surgery or thyroids, or there's always something more complex or more complicated that was on the horizon for next, so you never could get too comfortable with anything. So there was always something you hadn't seen before, that you hadn't done before, and unfortunately no two patients are ever the same, and so you'd always run into certain issues or complications with one for something you've already done 1,000 times, and it just kind of changes things. It's always challenging, even still today.
So what were some of the major things that you learned during your time with the residency? Was it what you were just talking about with just
A lot of the surgical stuff and kind of how to manage a lot of it. ENT is kind of a nice balance between clinic and surgical, and so we spent a lot of times kind of doing both, and there's all kinds of very complicated head and neck cancer cases. Some of those would be 16 hours long, kind of doing big cancer resections and trying to fill in the defects. And, I knew it was nothing that I wanted to do later in life, but still getting to see those and experience those, and from a science level, just some of the stuff that they could do is just unbelievable, and it was always kind of really cool to be part of that. But I knew kind of long term that that's not ultimately what I wanted to do.
Why was it not ultimately what you wanted to do?
One, they're long cases. It's exhausting. Head and neck cancer patients are usually never the healthiest bunch of people. A lot of them are still smoking, and so their wounds break down and they fail, and it's a process where a lot of times you never can get them better.
Mm-hmm. So that makes me think too, because when you're not in the medical field, I mean, all you know is sort of what you experience secondhand, but you hear of those things like 16-hour surgery, 16-hour procedures, and my brain cannot process how that's possible. I mean, was that a learning period for you to sort of be able to figure out, like, how does someone work for 16 hours on a surgery?
Believe it or not, when you get it, if you're the one in the operating room kind of actually doing stuff, time stands still in the OR. I feel like you have no concept of how long it's been, kind of what's going on, because you're just so focused on what you're doing. There were definitely times as a medical student when I was in on those cases where you're just holding a retractor and you can't even see what's going on, kind of where they're working, and you're just standing here like this, and you're very aware of every minute of those kind of cases, and you're just like, are they done yet? Kind of type things. And the one thing I've kind of realized is definitely when you're the one kind of up there doing it is that just time is just not even real when you're in there. And you look up and it's been 5 hours later, and you're like, oh wow, and you just kind of duck your head right back down, and you're right back at it.
That's interesting. Well, so what happened? You spent your time in St. Louis. You spent 5 years there.
Yes.
And then where'd you go? What'd you do?
So again, kind of just pipe dreams. I always like to kind of set goals and kind of things for myself. And like, well, what if I wanted to do a fellowship? Like, again, can I do one? Can I get one? And it's like, well, let's apply. The worst they could say is no. And ended up getting a rhinology or a sinus fellowship in Boston. It was an even kind of bigger, scarier move. And ended up at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Boston, which is kind of affiliated with Tufts University up there for a fellowship.
Why would you choose to do a fellowship versus something else?
I'm Oklahoma born, so I suffer from allergies horribly. I'm a product of the Oklahoma Allergy Clinic. And so I've always had kind of a sympathetic ear to patients with sinus and nasal problems, just because it's always been a lifelong struggle for me. And I always found that part interesting. I really liked the surgeries for those. And ENTs kind of can do fellowship-wise. I mean, there's fellowships for ear, there's fellowships for head and neck cancer, there's fellowships for voice, there's fellowships for pediatrics, for thyroid specifically, for sleep, for sinuses. There's everything has its own kind of even subspecialty, and I feel like even kind of with healthcare, that's even a lot of ways that things are trending is for people to be even subspecialized. So I figured more training's never going to hurt me. That nobody's ever going to fellowship for doing extra training, and it just happened to work out and ended up in Boston. So
Boston's bigger than St. Louis and bigger than Mustang and bigger than Tulsa.
Yes.
How was your transition to Boston and into this fellowship?
Boston was even a little more difficult because I absolutely knew no one. At least in St. Louis when I got there, I had kind of one guy that I kind of vaguely knew, and then I had my intern class, so you had kind of another little group of people to kind of bond with moving forward, and got up there, and it was just big city, kind of overwhelming, and trying to find somewhere to live was probably even one of the hardest parts. So I actually rented an apartment that I had never seen before, and never stepped foot in. And I got very, very, very lucky kind of moving forward with it. It couldn't have been more perfect. It was super nice, and it worked out great. But it was just kind of one of those experiences. And, Boston apartments are very different. Things like central heat and air and washers and dryers and elevators aren't common in a lot of their buildings. And so just trying to look for those kind of things and modern amenities that I took for granted. But thankfully, the fellowship that I was in had 3 fellows a year. And so there was an international fellow that came from Turkey. And then there was a girl that came, or she's from Texas, but she had trained in Mississippi. And she's now actually one of my best friends. So we definitely both were kind of in that situation of, oh my gosh, we're in Boston, she's from Texas, like I said, trained in Mississippi, and had kind of a lot of similar life experiences, and just that whole overwhelming move. She was married at the time and had a 2-month-old, I believe, when she moved up there to start, so she had kind of a little home system at least, and I kind of just was there, and so her and her husband definitely took me under their wings and had Thanksgiving dinner there and things, Easter, and we'd always kind of hang out on the holidays and do things together. And but Boston was just absolutely beautiful, and there's so much you can do within a 45-minute drive of Boston, and it's all these places you've never seen before and seen in pictures and read about in books, and so getting to be able to do a lot of that on the weekends and stuff was just, again, one of those experiences that I wouldn't ever change, and I'm so glad that it worked out. And
Did you have a lot of time to do stuff like that?
We were on call, I think, every 3rd weekend. So, we had, 2 weekends in a row that we usually had time to kind of go do what we wanted. During the week, we were usually pretty busy and couldn't get too much, but had at least 2 weekends out of the month that we could go play and do what we wanted to do. So,
what was your experience in the hospital there versus the other hospitals you had spent time in?
It was a much bigger hospital system than where I initially had trained, and so it was a lot busier, a lot more beds, a lot more going on. As fellows, we took our own attending call. So when I was kind of on call, I was on call by myself and didn't have kind of backup, and so that was even a little bit of a transition, knowing that you were there on your own medical license, and these were your patients. We even had our own clinics on kind of Fridays and stuff, and so there was that transition, which I feel like kind of made my life now a little more easy, because I had kind of that year where I was in that in-between stage where you're kind of on your own, but you're not really on your own, and so it was nice to have that to kind of work out some of the kinks and kind of get you used to seeing things on your own and managing things without somebody kind of standing behind you telling you what to do.
Mm-hmm. So what year did you do this fellowship?
2014 to 2015.
Okay, so I thought it was recently, just
Yeah.
based on the math from how much all the other things took. Was there differences in sort of the stress level or the cases that you had to deal with in a place like Boston versus St. Louis, or even,
Yeah, it was definitely it was a rhinology fellowship, and so the guy that I trained under was definitely well known for sinus surgery, and so people would drive from across the country. We had people come from Africa to be patients of his, and so it was always kind of a crazy experience, where these people come from all over the world because they've heard of him, to have cases done, and we would do just tons and tons and tons of sinus surgery every week, and so getting that kind of amount of cases and that exposure to different cases, and just different people from all kinds of walks of life. Boston is very much a melting pot of different people, and so just getting to meet all these different nationalities, different education levels, and just it was was quite an experience. You know, they definitely have the Boston accents. It's just as bad as it is in the movies. I mean, that it's real. I'll never forget the first time I walked into a patient's room, and they always, you know, make jokes about them saying wicked, and they really do say it. And the first time somebody used it in a sentence and wasn't mocking, you know, somebody with it, and it was just like, Doc, my nose is just, it's wicked bad, it's just wicked bad. And I was like, just trying to keep a straight face, you know, and I'm like, he said wicked. But, you know, it just all of every time I walked into a room, you're not from here. You know, kind of the minute I open my mouth, you're not from here. But
Were there any problems with that?
no, you know, I think they all like kind of hearing your backstories and kind of where you're from, and you know, if they've been going to the guy that I trained under for any length of time, then they were used to having fellows, and so every fellow kind of has a different story and different kind of background, and I think they kind of like getting to meet all the different ones. And
so if you were training under somebody with that large of a reputation in that specialty field for a year, what do you think you walked away with from that time? Other than the independence, I understand that.
You know, I'm a much better surgeon walking out than I was walking in. You know, just the amount of cases that we did, and he definitely operated in a different manner than I did when I was in residency, and so, you know, everybody does things a little differently, and there's little tricks and little pearls that everybody kind of has, and so, you know, I've been able to kind of blend some of the original training that I had with the training I had there to kind of have my own mix on how I like to do things. You know, but he definitely had some tricks that I think will definitely make me, you know, kind of popular in the community for things that he could do that just really made a big difference for people, and they got great responses, and that's why he was so popular.
Great, because you're right, that allergy thing.
It's very real here.
It's for real here. Well, so what happened after you finished with your fellowship then?
So started kind of looking for jobs. You know, my fiance is from Kansas City, and we actually met during residency training. And so, you know, he definitely wanted to go more on the Kansas City side. I wanted to come more to Oklahoma, and so we were kind of looking at everywhere there and in between. And actually kind of stumbled into this one. It was a weird kind of situation. My mom's family practice doctor works for Yukon, and of course my mom loves to brag about me, as you're very well aware. And was kind of telling her family physician about it, you know, that she's trying to get me to come back to Oklahoma, and she actually was the one that found out about this job and contacted me and got me set up for my interview, and lo and behold, here we are. But
so when did you start practice here?
August.
So yeah, August. I was like, I know it's fairly recently, but how did you feel about coming back here?
I was excited. I have some nieces and nephews that are here that I've never made it to see going to their birthday parties. You know, I miss holidays, and you know, I get to Skype with them. You know, my siblings have been really good to try to make me feel included in their lives still, and get to see them grow up. And you know, I really wanted to come back and be part of it. And so I was super excited to move. I don't know if my fiance was quite as excited, but you know, he willingly came. So.
Sometimes spouses to be just have
Yes.
to do that. Did he go with you to Boston then?
He did not. So he still had another year left in St. Louis, and so we actually lived apart for a year, which is always trying on any relationship. But you know, we made it through. So.
Well, it seems like if you start a relationship in this sort of what sounds like super stressful period doing a residency, then
Yes.
you probably can survive a lot of things.
You've definitely seen me at my worst, so.
Well, that's one of those things that is really, really quick to come back here. I mean, a lot of people, when you know you have to go out and do these specialties, it's not very often that you can quickly be so close to home.
Yeah, you know, I got really, really lucky, you know, that they were kind of hiring and looking for out here. You know, 'cause a lot of them, you know, Enid, Elk City, definitely, you know, talked and interviewed at a couple of those places, but it still wasn't quite home, and still a good hour drive from the city or something, and After living in Boston, I definitely wanted to be closer to the city because I've just kind of gotten spoiled with having certain amenities and things available, and so I knew I didn't want to live in rural parts of Oklahoma, and Yukon's still kind of considered the outskirts, but it's 10 minutes from anywhere I need to be, and it was perfect.
You can be in the prairie and you can be in the city.
Exactly.
Either way, pretty quickly. Well, I'm curious. I know that you've done a good amount of mission work and lots of traveling with this. Maybe let's talk a little bit about that.
First mission trip I went on was when I was a third-year medical student. We went to Nicaragua. Went with kind of a handful of my classmates and 2 of my professors.
Was that set up by the school?
No, it was actually one of the professors that was an internal medicine doc, kind of came in and just mentioned it when he was lecturing one day, and a couple of my friends and I were like, that sounds pretty cool, like we should look into this, and kind of invited ourselves along on the trip, and he let us, and so ended up getting to go down there. It's my first time out of the country, and so it was quite the experience. We ended up going up into kind of northwestern rural Nicaragua and took over a school there. I could tell you stories for hours if you really want to listen, but ended up staying up there and had a medical clinic that we kind of ran there, and the villagers would walk from all over to come in for the medical clinic, and they actually even, the organization we went with, so they had the medical clinic, they had a dental clinic, they had a veterinarian that would go around and even check people's animals in the community. They had a little eyeglass store for them. They had a whole clothing donation thing where they could just get sacks of clothes and kind of other necessities, and it was really kind of a nice little one-stop, one-shop kind of deal for them. The craziest part of it was Hurricane Felix hit when we were down there. So there's nothing like being in a third world country when a hurricane hits. So we ended up having to be evacuated, and it was flooding, and there was all kinds of craziness from that, but we made it safely out of the village, and kind of flew back 2 days early. But
so how did that happen? Like, how did the evacuation go, and how did?
So surprisingly, that we kind of heard rumors that there was kind of some rain coming, and they kind of were all just kind of blowing it off. And one of the girls' dads that we were on the trip with had called the national headquarters for the organization we were with. It was like, there's a hurricane coming to Nicaragua, like, are you guys aware of this? Like, do they know? And nobody was aware. And so we somehow kind of get radioed news and that somebody's dad had called, and it was one of the medical students that I went with. And they were like, oh, it's going to hit the East Coast, like, we're going to be fine. We may just see a little bit extra rainfall from it. We're not going to evacuate. Just don't worry about it. And so it was kind of one of those eerie, quiet nights, and they'd had kind of a church service and things, and just things just didn't feel right. You almost felt like you're in a bad movie. And so we all went to bed, and it started raining, and it kind of kept raining, and then 2 o'clock in the morning they come around and they're like, pack up stuff, just everybody pack up right now, we're leaving. So we're trying to pack up all our cots and everything, and we sit out, we get all packed up and just kind of sit there for 2 hours waiting for the buses to come. And so 4 o'clock in the morning in the pouring rain, we're trying to load all of our stuff onto these buses, and they're trying to get the buses out, and we get stuck. So then we have to go wake up all the villagers to come and dig us out to even get out. So we were way up kind of in the mountains when it happened. So they all graciously come and dig us out, and at this point we're kind of driving down the hills. The churches have flooded. There's kind of mattresses floating in the churches that we could see, and get to the bottom of the hill, and things are very, very flooded when we got to the bottom, and there's probably 6 feet of standing water on all sides of the bus and the roads. It's rushing in through the door of the school bus, and all I can think about is it's pitch black, it's 4 o'clock in rural Nicaragua, like, who's going to come get us? Like, this may be the end, like, but thankfully the buses didn't stall, we kind of kept going, and once we got kind of off of that low land and back on paved roads, everything was fine after that part, but it was a little hairy there for a while.
So do you know why the decision was made to evacuate sort of at that last hour instead of trying to ride it out?
I think they decided kind of that we were going to get a lot more rainfall than what they had expected. We didn't even take the direct hit. I mean, it was all just kind of the surrounding wrapping rains. But just the part of Nicaragua that we were in was definitely prone to flooding and was going to flood. And I think they felt if we didn't get out then, that it may be days before they could get us out otherwise. And I don't know that we had enough kind of supplies and things, because we definitely were making our own meals and all of our stuff was done off of a generator. But it was kind of a horrible feeling that here we are fleeing for safety and we just left everybody else there, which, I mean, I'm sure they're kind of used to some of that, but it just was an experience to say the least.
Yeah, holy cow. Oh, so I'm curious too. That leads to the idea of that when you're there, you're there for a certain period of time, right?
Yeah.
You're there to treat people for a certain period of time, and they're probably somewhat used to these groups coming in and there being clinic hours for a period and then nothing and then coming in again. For you as a third-year student, like, because you hadn't started residency, you'd probably, if at all, you had just decided what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So how did that decision to go down there, how did that affect or not affect sort of where you were going with your career?
It's definitely things that I had never seen before, and most Americans have some access to healthcare. And so kind of going down there, and I don't even think I had decided ENT at that point. I think I may have even still kind of been on the pediatrics track when we were down there, and these little kids that just no eardrums left and just these weeping ears and these infections that had just never been treated, and they all have worms and things of that nature. They get a lot of parasites down there, and just heartbreaking, to see a lot of that. And so I definitely knew kind of mission work is something I would like to be involved in, as much as I can and on whatever level I can. But it's a whole different world, and how grateful people are for any kind of care or anything like that was just very, very shocking, and very surprising, how appreciative, the villagers really were that we were there. And
did you feel prepared to deal with that level of need?
I was surprised, to be honest. It was worse than kind of what I'd expected in my head when we got down there. And then when I went to Africa, took it even to a whole different level, because I thought Nicaragua was bad. But at least most of the kids when we were in Nicaragua had shoes, had kind of some kind of clothing or covering, and just that amount of poverty. I don't know that you could ever kind of prepare yourself for that.
Mm-hmm. So talk about, you've been other places.
So my fourth year of medical school was my last rotation. Decided to go to Malawi, Africa, and spent almost 5 weeks over there. And that one that was kind of set up through the school. It was through one of the osteopathic kind of missionary organizations. And we went over there, and the nice thing was we slept in the capital every night. So at least kind of where we slept, we had power for the most part. And then we would go on day trips out into these rural areas and spend the day out there and then kind of drive back. And seeing a lot of that was just unbelievable. The amount of malnutrition and again parasites and just no shoes, no anything. I think one of the saddest things is we'd buy bottled water because you just could never drink the water that was there, and so we always had tons and tons of bottled water, and they would literally fight in the roads over an empty 20-ounce bottle of water. Because we tried to throw them off the back of the truck we were driving in so people could have them, but you never could throw them out when there was a crowd of people because they literally would fight each other to the ground over an empty bottle. And I feel like that's kind of when things in my head just really were like, wow, this is real.
Did you experience that?
Yeah. And then there's one of my that may be one of my favorite pictures. That one's from Malawi. And then there was these two little boys that probably ran along the side of our bus for a good mile, just smiling and waving, just so excited to see people coming to visit. But neither of them have shoes on. All their clothes are just completely ratted and torn. But they were just happy as could be, and they chased us as long as they physically could, just running and smiling. And
did they know what you were coming to do?
I don't even think they did. Because I think we still probably drove another hour or so after we had ran into them on the side of the road, and but just not a care in the world, and it was just, I don't know.
That's a great picture.
Just things that make me look back and kind of smile, and remember some of the things, but.
So how do you even tackle things like that? You're there for 5 weeks, you're in a lot of different places.
A lot of different places, and it's diseases that we're not exposed to a lot. Malaria over there is just rampant. So you'd see all these little kids, and the issue is they don't even have Tylenol, to give them. And so they're all having seizures from these high fevers, and they have malaria, and they're anemic and just super, super sick, and there's no way to get them to any kind of medical centers and stuff out there. And so one of the things is when people line up for those clinics, all they want is even just Tylenol and Advil. They're so thankful to even have just medicine like that. And it was heartbreaking. There was one day that we'd even drove out, and they were just having, some of the people I went with were OBGYNs, and they were doing kind of some studies on cervical cancer rates while they were there. And so they were kind of doing their own thing, and we had a women's clinic, but people just knew we were there, and so they started bringing their children over, and we hadn't stocked the van and didn't really have supplies to do a lot of that. And I think we probably saw 50 kids, and every single one of them was running high fevers and just sick, and not having supplies and not being able to do anything for them was one of the most awful feelings, in the world, is because you know how to make them better, but you just didn't have anything to help them, and just it's a very helpless feeling.
Yeah, what do you do about that?
There's nothing you can, you tell them to try to go to a medical center, but most of them can't get any kind of transportation to get anywhere, 'cause, nobody owns cars, and they're lucky if they own a bike, it's a big deal to have a bike, and just.
Yeah. So that was your second trip.
That was the second one.
Did you keep going?
I did. One of my mentors from Tulsa is very, very involved in missionary work, and he's every week somewhere on a different country. And he got kind of set up with Pros for Africa, which is kind of based out of Oklahoma. And they were taking a group of medical students and physicians over.
What's it called?
Pros for Africa.
PRO?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
like professionals?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was actually set up by a couple of OU football players. And they had teamed up with a lady by the name of Sister Rosemary. And she's done a lot of kind of talks here in Oklahoma, and it's a book, and she was even named one of Time's 50 most influential people, I believe it was last year. And she has a school over in Uganda. And she kind of takes on women that have been displaced by the Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRAs, came through Uganda and terrorized a lot of the villages, and a lot of the women got raped and had children out of wedlock, and it's very frowned upon over there, and so most of them couldn't go home to their families. And so she took all these women in, took on their babies and their children, and kind of taught them all a trade so that they could support themselves. And she would teach them to sew or to do things, clerical things, and and kind of gave them a new life. And so when Pros for Africa kind of got teamed up with her, they decided to make this big trip, and Feed the Children went, and the Starkey Hearing Aid Foundation went. And that's why my mentor called me, is because the Hearing Foundation was going to be there. And he's like, hey, do you want to come? I'm like, yeah. What do we need to do to make this happen? And so I ended up going to Uganda for 10 days. The fun part with that one was 10 NFL players also went with us. because of the Pros for Africa connections. Adrian Peterson was one of the guys that kind of helped set it up in the beginning. And he may be one of the few ones that's still playing that went on the trip. And so we had these, back then at least, they were all, most of them were still playing, and so just getting to go to Africa with those guys was kind of a whole different experience and much different kind of trip than the first time I went to Africa. We definitely had Wi-Fi in our hotels, we had swimming pools, we had power. We had Uganda CIA that escorted us everywhere we went, because they weren't going to let these famous athletes, have problems or be attacked in their country, and so we definitely had very, very high security everywhere we went. And
So were they recognized as celebrities even in Uganda?
yeah, a lot of them knew they were coming, and so they had researched a lot of them. And so, they'd be like, which one's Superman, or which one's this, and they'd come up and ask you because they didn't know who was who. But definitely their builds and their size, they definitely stood out over there, and so you definitely knew they were something, because they just didn't really kind of fit in with the typical African stature over there. And
So were they, all these football players, were they all African American?
yeah. And there was one lineman guy that went with us that was probably 300 pounds and 6'10", and I mean just towered over everybody that was there. And it's just a force to be reckoned with. But he was one of the linemen with Adrian Peterson, and he was a Minnesota Viking, and so since Adrian was coming, he came with him. And so it was a really, really kind of cool experience. And then
Did you get to know them at all?
got to hang out with quite a few of them. Roy Williams used to play for the Dallas Cowboys. Was there, and he, very, very personable, very super nice guy. And I've even we were Facebook friends afterwards, and contacted him when I came back to Oklahoma, and he even signed some pictures that I have framed in some of my exam rooms and stuff for me. And he's like, yeah, sure, come pick them up when you want to, and I'd be more than happy to. And they were a good group of guys to kind of just hang out with and have fun with. And the Starkey Hearing Aid Foundation part of it was really, really kind of cool. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of their videos on Facebook or anything, but putting hearing aids on somebody that hasn't really ever heard before, hasn't heard in years, is a really just cool thing to be part of and just to get to witness. And so I have some really cool videos of Adrian putting hearing aids on kids and stuff, and kind of getting them set up with them and kind of dancing with them and stuff afterwards. And they always like to play music for them after so they could hear some kind of sound, because didn't always speak the same languages, but music's kind of universal, and it was just...
That's pretty amazing. So those are the videos you're talking about, are usually like where it's a child has a device put in their ear where they get to hear like their parent's voice or something for
Yes.
the first time, and there's always tears at the
There
end.
there's tears, and and they don't know language because they haven't ever been able to hear, so they can't always tell what you're saying. But they usually just sit over there, and kind of once they have it on, they'll just sit over there and just kind of be like ba ba ba, and just any kind of noise they can make that they can hear, and they'll just sit over there forever and just be kind of just mumbling to themselves because they can hear it, and they're just over there just smiling away, just it's pretty life-changing, and
So that was your job while you were there for 10 days, is you were basically not...
well, a lot of I treated the ear infections, and so
Yeah.
when they would be trying to fit people for hearing aids and they either had wax or really bad infections, they'd send them over and kind of let me get them cleaned out or get them on some drops and stuff, and then but I would definitely snake back over and try to be as much a part of that as I could, because it was just so cool to watch. And
It was cool. So how many people went on that? It sounds like a big entourage.
it was a big entourage for that one. So we had attorneys, we had physicians, we had medical students, there were the athletes, and they brought their own entourages, and there's probably 50 of us or so, I would think.
When was this? While you were at St. Louis?
It was either 2011 or 2012. I have to clarify dates for you. But
Oh no, that's fine. That's what I was kind of asking. It would
yeah, I was a second-year resident, I believe, when I went.
good enough. Wow, that's a huge deal. That's
Yeah.
a big production. So 10 days. So you went your days just kept getting, like, your travel just kept getting longer and longer. Is that the last sort of mission trip you've done?
That's the last one I've been able to go on.
In a while.
Trying to take off during residency was never easy. I got invited to go the next year, but I couldn't. Again, when you're in those smaller residency programs and you can't really just kind of jump ship, and so I wasn't able to go.
How did you make it happen the first time?
Actually took my own vacation for it. Is what it ended up counting as, and so kind of got it cleared that I could be on vacation during those days, and they let me go. So,
I'm sure worth it.
yes.
Well, so I hear you see the value in that. Like, I obviously, I mean, it's life changing to be in any of those experiences. But also, before we got started recording, you also talked about some of the experiences you had opportunities to do some of those sort of more rural clinic areas in Oklahoma as well. It sounds like. Maybe talk a little bit about some of that outreach within state.
Yeah. The rural cities were definitely kind of a whole different experience, and again, just kind of seeing people from kind of different poverty levels and different things, and kind of how people respond to certain medical conditions and diagnoses also is just kind of very, very different. There was a lot of chronic pain patients and things of that nature that we saw a lot. I feel like we saw more of it kind of when we were out in the rural parts of the state. Spent 2 months even in the Indian healthcare system in Tahlequah, so got to even kind of see some of the things from that side of the healthcare system. And we even definitely did outreach when we were in Tulsa even. We'd go, there's a John 3:16 mission bus kind of mobile clinic that would go around town that, definitely spent a couple Saturdays on those, and they even have a Bedlam clinic. I don't know if it's still running in Tulsa or not, but it would be the OU and OSU residents would get together and have kind of a free clinic in the evenings, and kind of treating even the big cities. I mean, there's plenty of underprivileged or undercovered people in America that can't get access to healthcare, and it is everywhere, unfortunately.
So is that a built-in thing for medical school, or is that something you do as an elective?
Kind of do them as an elective. It's on your own time. So if you want to spend some time on the weekends or kind of after hours of things, there's plenty of opportunities and needs that those clinics have. But it's definitely kind of a volunteer situation.
Is it something that is that a lot of students take advantage of?
I think there's a certain number that do. There's always a handful, that don't. But I always feel like I kind of got more out of it probably than the patients did. And so it was always something that I tried to do, and definitely keep things in perspective, and kind of make you look at your own life and kind of reevaluate things in your life. And I tried to every chance I could.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're getting close to the end of your time. There are a million other things I know I could ask you about, especially some of these travel points. And I know there's a million other things you can say. But I think we'll rein it in. Anything you want to part with, specifically, whether it's about sort of restarting this next phase of your career back in Oklahoma, or sort of where you see where you kind of hope to be in the future?
I was super excited, that I had the opportunity to come back, and I get to, even being in Yukon, it's a big enough city, but everywhere I still go, people know me, people recognize me, and it's kind of fun to see a lot of people that I went to high school with and take care of their kids and their family members, and I ultimately would like to be able to raise a family in Oklahoma, and have my parents kind of get to be part of that moving forward. I feel like it's a great state. I feel like things are, definitely moving and changing, and the whole downtown area and everything is kind of becoming revitalized, and I think the state's done a lot to try to recruit kind of younger positions and things that company wise, you know, and it's a growing market, and Oklahoma's not quite what you used to think of it. You know, the Thunder and things have done some wonderful things for the city and the state, and you know, but I just can't imagine being anywhere else. You know, this is home. It will forever be home. And it's good to be back.
Well, we're glad to have you back. I wish you lived closer to me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're gonna go ahead and
All right.
turn it off. If there's anything else that,
Particularly, I mean, there's.
all
Like
right,
I said, I could tell stories all day, but.
which is awesome.